sacrificed us. Ephesians 5:2, and it says, walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. And so Jesus' death on the cross is called this fragrant offering. It's a sacrifice to God. And then it's really interesting because Paul in Philippians talks about the financial gift that he was given, and he uses the exact same words to describe the financial gift. He says, now that we've received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, they are a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice, pleasing to God. Isn't it interesting that the finances that we give is talked about in the exact same way as the indescribable gift of Christ? It's an act of worship. And so what that means is that every time that we give, we're participating and we're worshiping and we're offering in the same kind of depth of what Jesus' death on the cross was to God. And it is a pleasable and acceptable offering to Jesus. And so our acts of worship, I want to encourage you, every single week when we give with the same heart in the same way that Christ sacrificed himself on the cross. Paul calls it a privilege. It's a privilege for us to participate in that. So I'm going to invite our ushers to come forward to receive our gifts and our tithes and our offerings here this morning. And let's make this an act of worship just like everything else we do on Sunday morning.
Redeemer, Thank you, Lord. Let's keep on singing. This next song is called Better Is One Day. I love this song. It's scriptural. It's got a great meaning. Sing out, Lord. Sing out to the Lord this morning. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul sings and even faints for you. For here my heart is satisfied within your presence. I sing beneath the shadow of your wings. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere.
all bow your heads with me. Father God, it always is truly better whenever we come into your presence, whether that's that one day in your courts, or whether that's the one day when we come here every week, or whether it's that one day that's every single day of the week when you are going with us. It is truly always better, especially when we have the free and open opportunity to be able to gather as a church body, as a fellowship, as a community of believers, God. It is so much better when we have this place where we can gather together, where we can worship your name, where we can be in your presence, and we can allow our faith to grow deeper. We thank you so much for that opportunity that we have. Please pour a blessing out on Pastor Scott as he gets ready to preach to us this morning. Allow our hearts and our minds to be ready to hear the words that you have planned for us to hear, so that way we can gain a bigger understanding of the plan that you have for you, a bigger challenge of how we can better follow you, and just how to get closer to you each and every day, that we strive to be like your son Jesus Christ, to grow our own faith closer to him, and also to help others find him as well. And we ask this all in your name. Amen.
Well, good morning. How are we doing this morning? My name is Scott Drummond. I'm the Director of Operations here at the church. And last week we started a brand new series called Transformed, and we're talking through the 6 key practices that we believe lead to spiritual transformation. And last week Pastor Bill introduced to us the idea of personal devotion and what that looks like for us. And so we're going to continue to talk through these this morning. But I want to kind of begin with a thought, and maybe you can track with me. I like things that are customized to my preferences. You probably like the same thing. Like, how many of you on your cell phone, I mean, you have your own, first of all, customized case. Some of you like bedazzled your case. You got the little pop-out thing on your case. I'm a no-case guy, which for some people that just makes your heart beat faster already. Like, have you ever dropped your phone? I've dropped my phone twice, but I did the little foot catchy thing, and so we're all good. So I'm like convinced I don't need a case. But then you do things like your wallpaper, you got that customized, your ringtone is customized, you make it exactly how you like it. You do this with your computer, you also do this with your wardrobe. I mean, you picked out your clothes, or your wife picked out your clothes today. It's all customized for you. You do it with your car. Do you want the tinted windows? Do you want the nice wheels? You do this with your house, with how you decorate it. I mean, we do this when we go to Chipotle, don't we? Well, do I want the burrito or do I want the bowl? Do I want the chicken or do I want the barbacoa? Do I want the black beans or do I want the pinto beans? Do I want the 4 kinds of salsa or do I want the guacamole, the cheese, and the lettuce? I mean, we get to decide exactly what goes inside our burrito. And someone said the first service, Scott, you're very familiar with the Chipotle menu. We also do this when we go to Starbucks and spend ridiculous amounts of money on expensive coffee. Why? Because we want our tall, non-fat, no-whip, vanilla cappuccino with room in a double cup, because we don't like the little sleeve thing, and the double cup keeps us from burning our fingers. We like it the way we like it, don't we? Apparently I'm the only one that likes it the way I like it. I'm guessing you do the same thing in your life also. I think we all like things the way we do and try to customize everything to our liking. Now, I want to ask you a completely disconnected question, and if you know me, it's really not disconnected at all, but it will feel like it initially. So, here's your question. Why do you come to church here? I mean, we've got professional bands, and we've got, if your first service, like 100 voice choirs, and we've got orchestras and multimedia for days, and sound system and lights. We have donuts in the foyer, especially the little chocolate Timbitty ones with the glaze. Those are my personal favorites. We've got average coffee, but then we've got a really good cafe, and if you even want to come and you can have your own smoothie made for you in the cafe. We've got hallways decorated like Disney. We have the best parking lots in all of Pickerington. And we have sermons where you sit there and you think, I think they're talking just to me. It feels like I'm the only person in the room. But here's the point. I'm not saying that anything I just mentioned is bad. I mean, I like all the things too. But if that's the reason why we come to church or why we pick a church, then we may have missed the point. See, now others, when you ask them, why do you come to church? They might be here because of friends or family are also here. And that's certainly not a bad answer either. But you might still be missing something if that's the reason, the primary reason why you're here. Now, there also may be some of you that are here because you feel some sort of religious obligation and you don't want to make God or your parents angry at you. And now, all I'm saying is there's this deeper reason for us to worship together. And knowing why we worship together, I mean, it is the linchpin for all that we can experience here. In fact, when we worship together with the right perspective, I'm convinced it can absolutely transform our life. And so this is what we're going to talk about today. This is the second of the 6 key practices here at Peace Church. But we're going to focus in on why we worship together. Now, here's the thing. Worshiping in the biblical tradition, it goes back for thousands of years. Even long before Jesus, there was a tremendous Jewish tradition where people would gather, and they would gather at the temple, and they would gather in people's homes, and they would study, and they would talk, and they would worship together. There were entire festivals that were gathered around just getting people together so that they could worship, and there's so much depth that we could look into, but I want us to focus in on one point in history, which was about 2,000 years ago. It was after the death and resurrection of Jesus, and you've got this brand new group of followers, these brand new Christians. Now, the Christian faith, it hadn't gone global yet. In fact, it hadn't gone much outside Jerusalem at this point. But when we look at them, we're going to go to the book of Acts here in just a second, but it gives us like a documentary glimpse into what their life was like in this brand new little worshiping community, in this brand new little church. And there's some things that I want us to look at. In fact, I'm going to invite you to get your sermon notes out, and there's some of the verses in there, and get a pen out, because as we go through this verse, I want you to start to look for some things. I want you to look for some things like, what are the practices that they were doing? What was the environment that was going on? And also, what was their sense of community like? And so I want you to see if you can pick some of those out without me even spoon-feeding it to you. But here's the reality. There will be a test later, so make sure you do a good job in writing this down. Okay, let's get to the Bible. Acts chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 32. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. You should probably underline that. And to fellowship. I would suggest underlining that. And to the breaking of bread. Also a good thing to underline. And finally, to prayer. Good thing to underline. So here's the thing. In our one little short verse so far, we've already been given, there are 4 things that this brand new little worshiping community started to engage in. The first of which is to the apostles' teaching. Now, why is this even a big deal? I want you to think about it this way. You've got this brand new group of people, followers of Jesus Christ and this gospel that he preached, and you don't have a Bible. It's not like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were even written yet. And so the only way that you would have any understanding about who Jesus was and his message would either be A, you were a part of one of the experiences, maybe you were in the crowd when Jesus was preaching throughout the whole region while Jesus was still here on earth. Or you've talked to somebody that has shared a story of what they heard about the gospel of Jesus. Now, if you're an apostle, what does this mean? This meant that you were one of the very few that were a part of the inner circle of followers of Jesus. And they all had first-hand accounts. They saw it all happen in real time. So you got to think of what amazing privilege this must have been if you're in this brand new early church and you have one of the apostles, they're just teaching. Let's say you've got John, and John was one of even the inner circle with Jesus. And you could say, Apostle John, could you describe to us again that night in the Garden of Gethsemane right before Jesus was crucified? Can you tell us the story again? Don't leave out any detail, because you were there. And I would imagine that people would hang on every word from the apostles' teaching. Why? Because this communication and this teaching, this was life to them. This was laying the foundation of faith for them. Without Bible and without all the modern tools that we have that we just know what we believe. I mean, there was no Sunday school curriculum at this point. There was just the stories told by the followers of Jesus and those firsthand accounts. And so no wonder that this brand new community of faith, no wonder they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. It also said they devoted themselves to fellowship. Now, you don't need to overcomplicate this. It's exactly what you think it is. Fellowship. They got together, they ate, and they drank together. Like community, relationship. That's what they were doing. It was one of these priorities of this brand new early church. And then it goes on to say, and to the breaking of bread. Now, there's the obvious interpretation of this, which is literally eating, breaking of bread, like having a sandwich. I mean, that's what they're doing. But then there is also this idea of the breaking of bread of, we would know it as communion or the Lord's Supper. In fact, it was one of these practices that Jesus gave brand new meaning to for his followers. And it's something we do the first Sunday of every month here at Peace Church, where there is the literal breaking of bread with the representation of this is all about the life and death and sacrifice that Jesus Christ made for us. And so these people, this brand new church, they were regularly breaking bread together, remembering why they were here. And then finally, it says they were coming together to pray. Again, a practice that we have already done this morning too. We have joined together in prayer together. And so for these new followers, I mean, this was the big landmarks of what they were doing. But then look at verse 43. We get some more detail here. It says, everyone was filled with awe. Say awe. Everyone was filled with awe at many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. In other words, something pretty cool was going on here. And we don't have a lot of detail as to what all the signs and wonders were, but there was an environment of excitement. There was an environment of anticipation with these followers of Jesus, this small new church. And so it's like there's this. Have you ever been in an environment where there's just an exciting or charged atmosphere? I mean, and for this early church, this was what was going on here. But now, let's look at the next part, because it's going to focus in on relationships and how they interacted with one another. Verse 44, it says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Now, I think this is a little bit funny, because how often does everybody have all things in common? Like, this is like the flowery version of what was going on, because you don't have everything in common with the person sitting next to you right now, and you've been married to them for 25 years. So it's like, okay, but what's the idea of what's being conveyed here, and which is our next part of the verse? So what did they actually do? They sold, there we go, they sold property and possessions to give to everyone that was in need. So in other words, these people, they are taking responsibility for each other. So those who had more helped those who had less. Why? Because they were in this together. Now, this next verse, it feels like a recap, but I think it's repeated for emphasis. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread, all right, we got that already, in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And so, there's this communal environment going on here. They're doing everything together. And then we've got the big finish. And they were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. It says they praised God together. And what was real neat with all of this was that this behavior, this environment that they were in, these things that they were doing together, it was so attractional. Because what they were doing was different than everything else in their culture was demonstrating. Why is this? Because this particular gathering, for the first time, was making a statement of this worship gathering is not about race or the religion you come from or whether you're male or female. It's not about class. It's not about, is it just for the rich or just for the poor? But this was for the rich and the poor, the educated and the non-educated. This was for the powerful, and it was for the powerless. So this community, this brand new faith community, as we read it, this must have been awesome. And so this whole thing, this gives us a picture of what it looked like in the early Christian days of worshiping together. But it does not completely help with the ultimate question that we're here to answer this morning, which is, so why are we worshiping in the first place? Well, I want us to dig just a little bit deeper to do that, because this is the list of the whats. But if we don't grab a hold of the why, again, we might miss the whole point. Now, to do this, I want us to go to the Gospel of Matthew. Now, we just came off of a whole sermon series called The Art of Neighboring. And we spent a lot of time on a few verses, and I just want to touch on it briefly because I think it's important for us to have an understanding of where our worship is really coming from and what it is to be about. Let's look at Matthew chapter 22, beginning in verse 36. So there's this interaction with these people, with Jesus, and they had this question. They said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." In other words, Jesus, what is most important? And Jesus is saying, I want you to worship God with everything inside you. And so we know this, and I think we intuitively get this because this is one of the primary messages that we have been given as a part of the church and as church followers. We've been told this, that you can have a personal and intimate relationship with God, which is amazing and which is true, but it's not the whole truth. But we like our customization so much, and we like it the way we like it so much, that if we're not careful, we will cling to this part of everything I do with God is personal, and it's just about me and my interaction with God. And Jesus is saying, yeah, but not so much. Because, again, the greatest commandment starts with this love of God, but then Jesus immediately transitions and says in verse 39, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Somehow this singular direction got changed, and Jesus says, not just about you and God, it's about you and your neighbor, you and the person next to you, you and the relationships that you have. But this is sometimes hard for us because we want to say, yeah, okay, relationships with other people are okay, and it's fine to worship with other people a little bit, but it's really all about my personal relationship with God. And what we do is we start to marginalize something that I think Jesus emphasized. See, worshiping together is not just about you singing and praising and worshiping God. It's not about how do we get the lights real low and get you in a dark room and you can close your eyes and it's just about this individualistic thing. No, Worship, as we see it, is communal. And it is something we do together. It is something that is corporate. It is about us and us gathering, just like the early Christians did in the temples and in the homes. It is about us eating and praying and learning and growing and singing and breaking bread and praying together. But the key is that it's done together. But it means that we've got to shift priorities and change the thinking a little bit, especially if sometimes we come into church and we think it's just about us and we're going to find our seat and we're going to have our own buffer zone and we're just going to focus on us and God and it's our own little private time. And I just want to challenge you and say, I love the fact that you're here. I love the fact that you're worshiping. I love the fact that you're looking at God. But what I don't want you to do is miss this bigger picture of what's going on here, is that we are gathered together. And something can happen when we're together that won't happen when we're alone, even alone in a group of people. And so to do that, I want us to look at one more verse before we close out this morning. It says this in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. It says, "For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them." That's a little Yoda-ish in its speech. I get that. But I want you to focus in. Which number is missing from this? And don't say all the rest of them. He says, where 2 or 3. Which number is missing? 1. Was that by accident? Did Jesus just make a mistake? No. But what's being communicated here? It's saying there is something powerful. And Jesus is saying, when at least just a couple of you come together for worship, you come together with my attention in mind. Jesus says, then I am with you. Let's peel that back one more layer. There are parts of God that we will never experience in a one-on-one relationship with Him. There are facets of God that will only be experienced when we come together and worship together. Jesus is prioritizing community. He's prioritizing the gathering. And it doesn't need to be a big gathering. Again, what was his first number? 2. You and somebody else. And Jesus says, I want to join that party. But it's about coming together. So let's bring all of this together this morning. We all have preferences in life. Things that we like. We have our own styles, whether it's from our phones to how we like our coffee. We like it exactly how we like it. And we also like church that reflects our values and styles and priorities and preferences. And I'm not saying that anything is wrong with this, but if we lose sight of why we are here in the first place, then we may miss the whole point of what God is wanting for us. We may have even been taught that church is just about you and God and what you get out of it and how much you like it and what style you like it in. But if we're not careful, this mindset puts us at the very center of worship rather than God and us. You might be sitting there thinking, okay, so Scott, are you saying that we're getting rid of the coffee and donuts? I am not a fool. No. You know, coffee and donuts and multimedia and lights and sound and hallways and all of these things, they have great value, but their value is specific. They let us speak in a common language. Like if I was up here speaking in a completely foreign language right now, you would not understand me and we would miss the whole point. And so all these things from our worship and our bands and our choirs and our environment, these are languages we use to speak the life-changing truth and gospel of Jesus Christ. But it's not why we are here. All these things are not the reason why we should all be here. Because why we worship? Is so that we can actually encounter God together. We can share a moment of solidarity with those that have a faith like we do. We can come into a place and find support, encouragement, and blessing. And this has the very power to change and transform our lives. So I want to invite you to put at the forefront of your heart and mind why we are here right now. I want you to do this because I want to invite you to participate in worshiping God together with me. In fact, as we close this service, I'm extending an invitation to you to say, will you join me in worship? And we've already done some things already. We've already worshiped in our giving today. We've already worshiped in our prayer today. And in some, we've already worshiped in our singing today. But I want us to cross the line that this is any type of spectator response that we do, or it's something that you do just on your own. And I want you to open your eyes, and I want you to open your mouths, and I want you to sing as a unified voice, because we are in this together. We worship together. We were created to do this together. Because when we worship together, it is only then that we actually can talk and listen and grow and develop and have a life transformed. We were created for this. And this is why we worship together. So I'm going to invite you to stand to your feet. There's a reason why we had the band come back when they did, and I want you to sing with me, but I want to challenge you. I want you to flip whatever switch in your head needs flipped. That this isn't a you and God time. This is an us and God time. This isn't I'm just going to keep the worship in my mind and in my heart. I want you to sing loud even if you're bad. And a lot of you are, and that's okay. But I want you to sing like you're alone. It's in the shower and no one cares. It doesn't matter. But there's something powerful that happens when we worship together. We can have something and participate in something, and something can change within our hearts that wouldn't change any other way when we worship together. So they're going to sing with all of their gusto. Right? Okay. And you're going to sing with all of your gusto. And I want to be clear, this whole thing isn't just about us singing loud. You hear me here? But at the same time, it has everything to do with us singing loud. Because it is an actual participation in something bigger than ourselves. So Steve, would you lead us?
There's nothing worth more than could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
Let us become more aware
Of your presence,
Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your
Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence,
I want us to recognize that each and every one of us, every weekend, are going to live in a tension between staying home, live streaming, getting church our way, exactly how we like it, and then on the other side, it's coming and joining and doing something together. And you might think that, does it make any difference if I don't show up? And I'm saying, I think it makes all the difference in the world. This isn't just because of what you will or will not get out of the service, but there are things that we will gain corporately because you're here. And so I want us to continue to be a church that lives knowing that there is a tension it's easy to just pull back and do the personal thing. And everything in our life is about customizing our world so that we can have that one-on-one thing exactly how we like it. But there is a call, I believe, from God saying we've been created to worship and to do it together. Because that's where transformation will happen that won't happen any other place. And so let us continue to worship God together, and let this be a place that we're not afraid to scoot a little closer and take away some of the extra chairs between us, just so that we can be an assembled voice. One big choir, one big, happy, weird, wonderful, dysfunctional family. But we're going to worship together, because that's where life change happens. I want you to know we love you all. God bless you all. Have an amazing day.
I will love you.
I will love
serve.